I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, Ben Habib, the former co-deputy leader of Reform UK, and Paul Richards, the former Labour Special Advisor. Good evening to you, gents. You're very welcome tonight. As are each and every single one of you at home, what's on your mind tonight? I bet I can imagine when it comes to lots of you, but you can get in touch all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay, or you can tweet or X me. I've got to just say, before we get into the agenda tonight, there's so much we need to discuss. I just want to reference that Sarah Sharif case, because we've followed this case with horror, quite frankly, and I do just hope that little girl rests in peace, and I hope those individuals that have today been sentenced, I wish that life meant life, that people never saw the light of day ever again, quite frankly. It's an awful, awful situation, and may that little girl rest in peace. And the big story, of course, on the news agenda today will be one that affects many of my viewers at home. I speak, of course, of WASPy. Are you a WASPy woman? Do you know what a WASPy woman is? Are you sitting there thinking, I've never even heard of this in all my life, in which case, where have you been? But worry not, because I shall explain all. WASPy relates to almost 4 million women who, you know, they're grafters, they went out to work, they paid their dues, and they expected to have a state pension. They knew what they were doing, and then the goalposts were changed very, very quickly, and in some cases, many would argue, without the proper and due process when it came to warning people and to give time for those people to accurately plan their retirements. Can you imagine that you're working, you think that you've got X amount of years to go and all the rest of it, you plan your life, you plan your finances, and then boom, the goalposts are shifted. You'd be very distressed, I imagine, by that situation. But many people have picked up the plight of the so-called WASPy women, promising time and time and time again to pick up this injustice and to fix it. It's been a big question mark as to what will happen next, hanging over these women. Well, today we've got the answer. The Work and Pensions Secretary said the following in Commons today. Let's take a listen.
Given the vast majority of women knew the state pension age was increasing, the government does not believe paying a flat rate to all women at a cost of up to £10.5 billion would be a fair or proportionate use of taxpayers' money, not least when the previous government failed to set aside a single penny for any compensation scheme, and when they left us a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
I can hear many of you at home. I've just heard one of my panel breathe a sigh of frustration with that. Now, let me tell you now, right? I could have literally filled my entire programme for so long with clips of prominent people within the Labour Party promising that they would actually do something about this. Liz Kendall, you've just heard from her there. Let me show you a picture of Liz Kendall. Not that long ago, I'll describe it. If you're listening on the radio, she stood there in front of a WASPy woman board, basically showing her support and her desire to define and find a fair solution for these women. You've got Angela Rayner. I showed you a clip in part of her. Let's listen to her clip in full, what she said back in 2019.
Well, the government failed the women who were born in the 1950s. They stole their pension, that contract, that agreement that they thought they had, and then accelerated it so that those women didn't have the chance to prepare for that. We said we'll right that injustice, and within the 5 years of the Labour government, we will compensate them for the money that they've lost. This is their money.
Honestly, right, I could genuinely go on. You've got Keir Starmer, him back in 2022. He's saying this is a real injustice. Why, you need to have this big campaign. He accepts that goalposts were moved and so on and so forth. And I mean, if you're a pensioner or a lady that's been affected by this, I understand why you would have voted for the Labour Party. You would have thought, hopefully, you'll finally get those wrongs righted. In fact, actually, I'll swing myself around and I'll come to you, Paul. Does the Labour Party have some kind of problem with pensioners in this country?
I think Liz Kendall's decision today shows that the difference between being in government and being in opposition. And in opposition, you can wave placards around and you can make some of the statements that you're highlighting. But when you get into government and you open the books and you see the true extent of the mess and you're confronted with the hard choices that governments have to make. And the choice today was, do we give £10 billion away to this group of pensioners, or do we do something different? Liz Kendall, I think, has made the right choice. It's going to cause fury. We know it will, and it is a really tough choice, but this is the situation Labour's inherited.
So I'll ask you again, do you have a problem with pensioners? Because this is now the second time that pensioners have been chosen as priority number one to smack.
Well,
so you've had the winter fuel, you've now got this one, so I put it to you again. Do the Labour Party have a problem with pensioners that have paid their dues their whole life, that have gone without, that have really struggled? We talk about the struggles of today. I mean, come on.
The other half of the announcement today, of course, was a reiteration of this triple lock on pensions, which means all pensions are going to go up, at least £1,000 for some pensioners. And so, actually, of course, Labour is on the side of pensioners. And the triple lock being maintained, public money being spent on those pensions, means that most pensions are going to be better off. And that's a good sign. So, it needs to be looked in the round. And also, as Liz Kendall said today, we're going to get waiting lists down in the NHS. We're going to have more police on the streets so pensioners can feel safer. You have to look at these policies in the round and all the things we are doing for pensioners.
All right, well, I'll look at it in the round then, because another announcement that was made today is apparently we're also skint and we can't afford to right the wrongs of injustice. We can't afford to keep our pensioners warm. But another announcement, seeing as you want me to take it in the round, is that another £35 million is now going to be made available for support for people in Ukraine. And this comprises £15 million for humanitarian support as temperatures drop in the winter. Keir Starmer goes on. He says Ukrainian families are enduring cold, dark nights, often without heating or light or electricity, he says. I'm telling you now, pensioners will be watching this programme in Britain today. They will be sitting there in cold, dark houses because of decisions.
They're not being bombed by the Russians, though, are they? And this is about supporting our ally Ukraine in a war, existential war against Putin's forces.
Where's the priority?
So you're comparing 10 million to support Ukrainians to 10 billion.
I'm not comparing 10 million. No, I'm comparing 35.
The waspy women want.
I'm comparing £35 million, and I've just described 15 of
Well, I think we need to do more for Ukraine. I think we need to put more money into that war because they've got to win it.
But I thought we were skint. To the point where we're literally telling our pensioners, I promise you, I speak to people all the time on this programme, they will be sitting, many people at home, Paul, they'll be sitting under blankets, they'll be wrapping themselves in goodness knows how many little layers of stuff. They daren't put their heating on. And whilst it's very tragic what's happening in another country, and my heart goes out to anyone who's suffering, charity, if you want to use that word, should begin at home.
It's in our strategic interest to support the Ukrainians, and we need them to win that war, because if we don't win it there, we'll have to fight in Estonia or Moldova. Putin's forces will just keep on coming.
It's a war that we've got to win. No, you've got no evidence.
There's quite a lot of evidence for everything he's done over the last 20 years. He keeps invading countries, and if he gets away with it, he carries on.
So the priority in your mind is fighting Russia, not protecting our own pensioners?
You can do both, because the triple lock will protect pensioners, Michelle, and that's
there will be no... This is a sidetrack, in a sense, but there will be no outright victory against Russia. It just isn't conceivable.
But they can be expelled from the Ukrainian territory.
They will not be expelled from Ukraine. That war has become an intractable war out of which both sides will find it extremely difficult to get out. And the 10 million that was promised to Ukraine today is frankly a drop in the...
It's not 10 million, it's 35 million.
35 million is a drop in the ocean compared to the near £7.5 billion that we've given to Ukraine to fight the war, or the £11 billion, and I'm going to now make my point, £11 billion that we've given to foreign climate change projects, or the £50 million that we declared yesterday, a couple of days ago, for Hayat Tahrir Shams, an al-Qaeda proscribed organisation. We, the British government, are going to be giving a terrorist organisation 50 million quid, apparently for humanitarian purposes. It's all about spending choices. And what really gets my goat is when you hear Labour wrongly and falsely trotting out this £22 billion black hole. Any budget deficit is a black hole. And notwithstanding this false claim that they keep making about £22 billion being in a black hole, in the last budget, there were £70 billion of new spending obligations. £70 billion, half of which was funded by tax rises, and two-thirds of those tax rises fell on the working class.
But the WASPI compensation wasn't funded, was it? There was no 10 billion in the budget for that, which is why Liz Kendall can't afford it today.
The point I'm making, Paul, is that it is all about choices. Government spending is all about choices, and they have chosen not to pay the WASPy women. And I think we've got to recognise that. It's about choices. But the bigger point here, I think, is a failing United Kingdom. A United Kingdom where the social contract is habitually being set aside in the pursuit of saving money because we, as a country, are getting progressively
poorer. Don't forget the
poorer.
extra money for the NHS, though, in the last budget. I mean, there is choices to be made, and we decided to prop up the NHS, and that's a good choice for everyone, including pensioners.
The NHS has had oodles and oodles of cash, much more than there was on the red bus in 2016, spent on it over the last few years. There's no shortage of cash going into the NHS.
I want to carry on this conversation after the break. I'll be bringing in some WASPy women. I'll be bringing in lots of you at home. My inbox is literally on fire on this debate. I also want to explore that topic that Ben has just primed, the social contract in Britain. We've discussed this before. Do you actually think that has now broken, ripped up, shredded to smithereens? Or do you think it still exists and you're still respectful of it and you think, brilliant? Get in touch and tell me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
I used to have to use the razor that my ex-girlfriend used to shave her legs. It scratched me and it made me feel weird. But fear not, because Manscaped is back with a game changer. This isn't just any old shaver. We're talking about the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. One for that baby smooth look and another when you want to keep it a bit rugged. Get this, it's waterproof. You can use it in the shower, by the pool, or even while scuba diving if that's your thing. This beauty runs for 75 minutes on a single charge. That's enough time to shave your face, your mate's face, and still have juice left over for touch-ups. You'll also get their Power Shave Gel for a proper wet shave experience, and a face shave soother to keep your mug looking fresh and irritation-free. It's like having a barber in your bathroom, minus the awkward small talk. Click the link in the description and use the code GBN for a whopping 20% off and free shipping with the code GBN at manscaped.com. Join the 11 million blokes worldwide who trust Manscaped. Your face will thank you, and so will your wallet.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, I've got Ben Habib and Paul Richards alongside me. Hell hath no fury like a waspy woman scorned. Goodness gracious me. Honestly, I'm not exaggerating. The anger that is coming through from viewers at home is really quite palpable. The disappointment. I think people are just in despair, really, really despairing at the moment about politicians promising one thing and then delivering something completely different. One of my viewers, Catherine, as well, she says, please can you point out to everybody, they keep talking about things like the triple lock. She's saying there's 2 different types. You've got your new basic pension and your other one. She's saying for the ones that are on the basic previous one, they get left out of a lot of stuff. That's according to Catherine. Who's this? Robbie says, normally, Michelle, I agree with you, but I don't agree with you and the WASPy women on this. You're saying WASPy women only care about those born up to 1959. What about everybody else? He goes on to tell me that he's had some challenges with his pension and he thinks now 64 would have been a fair pension age for both men and women. So many of you just feel so let down. If you are a WASPy woman, Helen, you're saying that you are and that you just feel completely betrayed. Catherine, Michelle, why are we constantly being able to give money overseas, abroad for all different issues? Why can't we help people here? I think that is the $1 million question that really is coming through thick and fast. The notion of the social contract, I've got to tell you now, loads of you saying, no, Matt, says Michelle, there isn't a social contract between the government and ordinary people. Personally, I feel finished with this country and the place that I used to call my home feels so very long gone. And he says, it is all so sad. That's Matt. Ben Habib, bring you back in on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it is all about the social contract. And what we've seen, and I would start probably in 2010, when in the pursuit of rescuing the banks, the Bank of England printed money. And what that did was rescue those who had actually got the country into real trouble and devalue the pound in the back pockets of the working and middle classes, who had no hand in creating the credit crunch of the 2009 period, 2008-2009 credit crunch. And that was the biggest breaking of the social contract from a financial perspective that I've seen in my lifetime. Those who caused the crash were bailed out, and those who had no hand in it were punished by weakening the value of sterling in their back pocket. And then instead of doing something to mitigate the damage that had been done to that social contract, George Osborne, who was then Chancellor, went on an austerity drive, punishing the working and middle classes even more. And I'm absolutely convinced one of the causes for people voting to leave the EU was what happened in 2009 and the bailing out of the banks and the punishing of the working and middle classes, because it fundamentally broke the value of money and therefore the social contract between the state and the people. But we have habitual abuses of the social contract. So, for example, we do not police our borders. It is an absolute cornerstone, in my view, of a social contract with the British people that our borders should be enforced. We have, for example, 1.5 million foreigners on benefits in this country, which I estimate costs the Exchequer around £15 billion a year. Then we have illegal migrants who are costing the thick end of £8 billion a year. That's your £22 billion a year just there. And then instead of looking after the interests of Britons, of British citizens, we get constant feed on what we're doing abroad, all these great projects on which we're spending money, which have no tangible and immediate benefit for the British people. And I saw Starmer today defending his inability to commit to increasing our military spend to 3% of GDP. Our armed forces are a shadow of their former selves. We are busy stoking the bear in Russia, firing British-made Storm Shadow missiles into Russia, but we're not arming up in the UK, again, because we can't afford to do it. And that is another breach of the social contract.
Ben, I thought you believed in a small state and lower taxes, and now you're saying spend more on the army, give more to the pensioners. I mean, you sound like a socialist.
No, hold on. What I wouldn't have done is raise taxes on the working and middle classes like Angela Rayner did in the last budget, absolutely clobbering, again, the working and middle classes. Hiring has gone through the floor in the last...
Which tax
the increase in national insurance on employers and national insurance. We've seen a complete freeze in the employment market over the last year and a half, hitting precisely the people which, again, the Labour government promised that it wouldn't hit. I'll just finish. So we have had a non-stop series of massive breaches of the social contract with the British people. It's not just the Labour government. It's successive governments ever since 2009, as far as I can see.
I think people still do believe in the social contract. I think most people in this country support the police. I think they believe in paying their taxes on time. I think they love the National Health Service. I think there is a connection
people
still
who voted
to those
Brexit.
Institutions of our country.
People
I think most people have not lost faith in those British institutions. I think there still is a contract as a result.
People who voted to leave the EU look at Parliament and see it as a body that stood in the way of democracy. That's what we see.
Well, who are these people? I mean, you might, but I think you can't
people
speak
who
for all
voted
people.
to leave the EU. That is it is not about losing faith in the Labour Party or losing faith in the Conservative Party. It is losing faith in the institutions of this country that govern us. If you look at the turnout of this last election, it's a great example. Turnout of 59.5%. Labour Party got fewer votes in 2024 than it did in 2019, and yet it got a thumping majority.
Yeah,
and that's because the people are on strike. They don't believe in the institutions.
I don't
Absolutely.
Well, don't worry, everybody. We're going to carry on this conversation about the EU towards the back of the programme, but I do want to just explore what you just said. You were saying, Paul, that people still believe in the institutions of the police and whatever, and therefore the social contract is still in place. And I don't doubt that. I think that people do, yes, it's great to have the police and whatever. The challenge is, and this is what I would ask you, do you honestly believe, because the contract is, it's a two-way street, isn't it? You put in, and in your hour of need or moment of need, you get out.
Yeah.
Do you actually really genuinely believe that the institutions that you've just mentioned, when people have spent their lives putting into the system, that those institutions are there for those individuals during their moment of need?
Well, take the National Health Service, which I mentioned. I think that has enormous public support. It's almost our national religion, isn't it, our support? You did. You asked about institutions, what you put in and what you get out. You put in, you pay your tax and you get the NHS.
No, I don't doubt that they have
explain
support.
What you meant then.
I don't doubt that they have support. I think everyone still supports the concept and notion of the police and the NHS. I'm asking you, in your moment of need, whether or not, I don't know, you feel like you're about to collapse in the streets or your house gets burgled or whatever, as much as we might love and whatever these institutions, do you believe and do you have faith that they are there if you need them in your moment of
I
need?
see what you mean. Well, one of our critiques is, of course, there were fewer cops than we needed, so we're going to put more police on the streets. One of our critiques was you had to wait too long for NHS treatment, so we're going to shorten the waiting list. So these institutions, to survive in the same way, do have to be modernised, and there has to be more money put in.
I don't see the NHS as an institution. It's a public service. And it's the result of what our institutions do. Institutions are Parliament, the Supreme Court, the Bank of England. These are the military.
You'd like it to be social insurance and not have a national health service available to all, do you?
These are the institutions which are being hollowed out. Right, I think we're going to talk about democracy in the next segment. Hollowed out by anti-democratic moves made repeatedly, largely, I'm afraid, on this occasion by Labour governments, not Conservative governments, dumbing down our democracy and habitually breaking the social contract. It happens all the time. I mean, two-tier policing is another great example.
Wow.
Progressive discrimination, the regulatory framework of diversity, equity and inclusion, all a breaching of the social contract with the British people. All of it.
Look, imagine this is your social contracts that you've got at home, everyone. Do you sit and longingly and lovingly caress and stroke this and think, yes, Michelle, the social contract, it's there? Or are you quite frankly like this? You say, you know what, that social contract is not now worth the paper it was written on. How do you feel about that? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts.